Good evening, everyone. Welcome. How's everyone doing this evening? Oh, really? Okay, one more time. How's everybody doing this evening? Okay, that's more like it. There's the energy. So, my name is Elizabeth Calacudla. I am a talent engagement consultant here with Accenture, and I just want to welcome all of you to our Forge. We are part of Industry X Auto, which is the digital practice of Accenture, and as you can see, we have a really cool space up here. So we have the 8th and 9th floors, soon to be the 2nd and 3rd as well, so we're really excited for our growth. Obviously, if you have any questions about organization, feel free to reach out to me or my partner, Julie Walker. We have our business cards around, so if you need anything, please let us know. We're here to help you and support you. Just a few housekeeping items. I will be passing around this iPad to the group. So I just wanted to kind of go around. If you didn't get a chance to sign in and want to, feel free. We would love to get at least your contact information so we can kind of get an attendee number for this evening. You will not be spammed if you put your email in. Scouts promise. We're going to start that. Thank you so much, Julie. If you need the restroom, it is out in this hallway. We're going to have someone kind of hanging out by the doors, so feel free to go in and out as you need. And you'll be able to be let in. Obviously, you know where the food and beverages are. Feel free to make yourself at home. It's really important to us. It's a home for us. We want it to be a home for our guests as well. This evening, we're excited to have Rick Ucker presenting. Rick has been with our organization for 4 years, the senior software artisan, and he is an advocate of healthy practices that produce high-performing teams. And so you're going to hear about the good, the bad, the ugly of pair programming this evening. So if this is something new for you, awesome, welcome. This is a great learning experience. If you are an expert or someone who works in this space day in and day out, maybe you'll gain some more insight. You'll be able to bring it back to your teams. So with that being said, Rick, we're excited to hear from you, and we'll just join you to the front.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to try without the microphone. Can everyone hear me well enough in the back? What? Exactly. I saw one thumbs up and a what. Knowing where that the what came from, I'm going to say everyone can hear me. So, like Elizabeth said, my name is Rick, and I will be your slide reader for the evening. So I've been a pillar for about 4 years, as you said, and I'd like to talk about pair programming this evening. Pillar's core practices, and also about how
Rick, we actually can't hear you.
Okay.
That's the kind of feedback I was looking for the first time, but thank you. Okay, there go the slides. So first off, we're going to touch on the topic of learning styles this evening. But at the forefront, I want to give a big call out to anyone who identifies themselves as a participatory learner. By the way, I know the font's a little small. We've got monitors around the Forge for anyone who may be close to a different one. Participatory learning, I think, is very important. I know I fall into this category. My point is, I know that when I'm in a business meeting, at a talk, being a passive listener and just kind of having to sit there with my hands folded for more than about 15 minutes tends to put me to sleep. So I want this to kind of be a discussion, and if at any point there's something you want to say, something that interests you, you have a question, raise your hand, interject, whatever the case may be, and we kind of make this participatory as we're able tonight.
Oh no. Anybody out? I think the building.
Assuming we don't have to vacate. Okay. I think that was just the door. All right. A little about me. I've been in the industry as a developer for about 9 years. Lost track of how many companies I've been at, but more than 2, let's say. I've been at Pillar for about 4, a little over than that actually. I worked in kind of the solitary cubicle environment. That's how I started my career. I kind of got used to having my comfortable desk with walls to keep people out, and my desk full of things that were all mine, and sort of a space no one would invade. It was very comfortable, but for reasons we'll get into, I honestly didn't, in retrospect, like it like I like the way we work now. I've also worked in sort of the, and I put this in quotes intentionally, the open team space that we see in a lot of places. Speaking specifically of the experience I had working for a large enterprise that you may or may not be able to see through the window, we had the open teams, and for anyone who may not know what I'm describing, the open team space is, imagine sort of like the environment we've got here this evening. We've got a bunch of tables next to each other, and we've got people at them. Just add computers, and everyone's working on things. The idea being that rather than walling yourself off in a cubicle, you're open. You're supposed to be able to collaborate with people, be interruptible, collaborate with the people around you. Now, can I get a show of hands who works or has worked in an environment like that? Okay. Of all of those hands up, which looked like it was the majority of you, who never wore headphones in that environment? I'm seeing 3, 4. Okay. And that's kind of my point, right? Because those environments are supposed to be open and collaborative, but really what happens is they get so noisy and chaotic that we end up putting the earbuds in because we can't concentrate. It's too noisy, which is in effect not unlike the cubicle environment. So I think a lot of the time it doesn't live up to kind of the promise that was made. Already covered that. 4 years at Pillar. I've been on, I believe, 7. I believe this is my 8th client engagement in 4 years, which, I don't know, it varies, but I think that's about average. I think I've averaged about 8 months per client that I've been on, which has been a pretty interesting experience. One of the things that I like about that is I haven't been married to any one thing for terribly long, meaning I get to be there long enough to learn a tech stack, a language, a style, a problem domain, make a difference, and then somewhere around there it's time to move on. And that's been great for my development because I've learned a lot more in a shorter time doing that, and with pairing, which is the next thing we're going to talk about here, obviously. If I had to map sort of how much I've learned to time, we can measure a 2-dimensional axis, I would characterize my time pre-pairing as sort of a linear progression. Time goes on, I do things, I learn things. At Pillar, through pairing, and to be fair, a combination of pairing and some very smart individuals that we've got, it's like a hockey stick, exponential progression. I thought it was pretty good when I started 4 years ago, but in retrospect, I barely knew anything. Before I get into this talk, I always like to give a big, bold disclaimer, all right? So we're going to talk a lot about pair programming, what it is, how Pillar practices it, and I'm going to get into some do's and don'ts, but just be aware, I go 2 slides at a time sometimes. I don't always live up to the do's, and I sometimes violate the don'ts, just like anyone. I'm not perfect, but I'm going to paint a perfect picture of pairing for you tonight. Now, just to kind of set the stage, what is pair programming? I think most or all of us have some idea what that means, but we'll go through it. First of all, anyone who grew up watching a lot of Sesame Street like I did, handsome man on the side there can vouch for this, he was there. We have a 2-headed monster. There's a song about how 2 heads are better than 1. I kind of had an aha moment when I started at Pillar and we started learning at this, because what we do is we put people through an academy, which is, I believe the way we're running it now is 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks when I started, and we did a lot of pairing with each other, and we were able to learn how to get good practices going. But I kind of had this aha moment where I realized this is what they mean when they say collaboration. It doesn't mean asking questions of someone from time to time. It means being right next to someone and working with them and solving problems, having those discussions, and actually having a partner as you solve the problems. And I think that's been very rewarding. So, if we can sum up pair programming in a few bullet points, it would be that you've got 2 minds on 1 problem, meaning 2 people are solving a specific problem together, whether it be a feature, a user story, some unit of work that we're trying to produce for our client. I like to say that we got instant rubber duck debugging. For anyone who might not know what that refers to, rubber duck debugging is a common story that we like to talk about, just in the industry in general. So if you can imagine a scenario where you've got a junior developer who just joins a team full of seasoned developers. Like anybody who's new on a project, the developer's going to have a lot of questions, a lot of things he doesn't understand, lots of knowledge that needs to be learned in order to kind of be effective. So what happens? Every time you got a question, he goes over and asks the senior developer. Because the question's asked, but pretty quickly it starts to annoy the senior developer because senior developer's got other things to do as well, other responsibilities. So in order to kind of ameliorate this, one day he approaches the junior developer, he pulls a rubber duck out of his pocket and says, "I'll tell you what," puts it on his desk, "the next time you want to come over and ask me a question, explain it to the duck first," and walks away. So a little bit of time goes by, the junior developer gets stuck again and doesn't understand something, and he starts to get up, but instead he goes and asks the senior, instead of going to ask the senior developer, he says, "All right, duck, I'm having this problem with this application. I start up my server, the application crashes, I don't understand why. I've looked at this thing that I'm sure must be the problem, and it certainly couldn't be this other 2 or 3 things that, come to think of it, I never looked at. And you know what? I think I got the answer." And I've experienced this before I even knew what rubber duck debugging was. It's a real thing. I had a senior developer who once asked me to write everything out in an email, and that did the trick. Also works. So the point is, why do I bring this up in the context of pairing? I say you get instant rubber duck debugging because you've got someone at your side focused on the same problem, and you're talking it through together. When you don't understand something, you ask your partner. Your partner hopefully either understands it or can help you find the right answer, and you solve it together. Okay, another benefit that we've got is an instant code review. I'm sure we've all been through the code review process where maybe we've been working on something for a day, a week, hopefully not too much longer than that, but we finally get it under code review by someone else and they tear it to shreds. We didn't know that there were these best practices that we were supposed to be following. Half of it's already solved. Oh, and by the way, this is going to blow up if you ever try to throw it in production. Which doesn't feel good for anyone who's not been through it. So the point being, this is another advantage. When you've got someone that you're working with as you go through this stuff, you've got 2 people looking at the same thing. And when things are really working well, you've got someone to check you on your bad ideas or someone to bounce ideas off of and to review your code as we go. And we're going to talk about the particulars of that. Another benefit that I really like about pairing, I found personally, is a big check against what I call rabbit holes. Now, as a developer, I'm going to describe a scenario that I think is probably going to resonate with most or all of you. You're working on a problem. Maybe it's something you've never encountered before. Maybe it's a bug. Maybe you're not sure what design pattern to use for something, or what have you. Something non-trivial that you're trying to solve. You're pretty sure you're most of the way through it, and you just need a little more effort to get over that hump. You're pretty sure you can solve it. Well, half a day of Stack Overflow later and no solution, you're finding yourself stressed out, tired, and it's the end of the day, time to go home, and you've really done nothing but frustrate yourself. I know I've been through that. My point is, a lot of the time when we're pairing with people, we don't go down that rabbit hole to begin with. We don't go chasing the wrong white rabbit. So this is why I say, and I hope by the end of the time you agree with me, 2 heads are better than 1. That said, it is a 2-way street. We're going to get into some of the particulars because there is give and take involved, and it definitely requires active engagement and effort on both parties. We covered the what. When is pair programming? At Pillar? Always. It's a core practice, and we always pair program. Except when we don't. As with anything, there are rules and there are exceptions. It is a core practice. Occasionally we find situations where we don't actively pair. Pretty rare. Maybe split up to research a problem, maybe time constraints, this and that. But we do, by and large, it is a core practice. It's considered a non-negotiable. So for anyone who is interested in working at Pillar, take note. Some workplaces use it selectively. Some of our clients like to do that too, but we do it almost always. We're going to talk a little bit about outcomes, which we'll get to again at the end here. The way I see it, these are outcomes of healthy, high-functioning pairs. You have higher trust, meaning that as you work together, you have good practices, you get to know one another. The fear of failure is removed, and I think that's very important. Failure meaning making a mistake, breaking the bill, what have you. I sort of early in my career kind of experienced being thrown under the bus for stuff like that, and it kind of makes you afraid to try. Has anyone been through that? Seeing a few heads nodding, for sure. Well, I like to challenge that. That's not the way we typically do it here, and I like to call people out on it when they do, because, I mean, being able to fail, making mistakes is part of how we learn. Learning what to do is, part of that is learning what not to do, and we learn that by making mistakes. We have higher creativity, and this is something that research has actually shown that when you have two people working on solving a problem together, they typically do take more creative solutions, because you alone are more single-minded and more likely to go straight down that rabbit hole for right or for wrong than another person is who may not understand it. So what may happen is you're saying, you know, I think we should use a given design pattern here. The other person says, why? And you begin to explain it, and you kind of have that rubber duck effect. Maybe you realize you're right, or maybe you don't. So that is an immediate outcome that we get. Another one that's very important to me that I'm very grateful for is we foster an environment of learning. You learn things with your pair partner. You should be able to trust that pair partner to teach you things you don't know and to learn from you when you know things the other person doesn't know. I think that somewhat arises organically when you trust each other and you're able to make mistakes. All of this feeds together into the last, I went the wrong way. Last outcome, which is higher quality of our deliverables. This is something that I won't get into nitty-gritty, but studies conclude also that in this kind of collaborative, high-trust environment, what you end up is higher quality deliverables, along with other practices that we have. TDD is another core practice. Fewer bugs, easier maintainability. These are outcomes that we absolutely drive for. I want to take you through a day in the life for just a moment. What I've got here is a photo that I took about 24 hours ago of this handsome gentleman here, and looks like your pair partner is not with us tonight.
Couldn't make it.
That's a shame, couldn't make it. So this is actually two guys just pairing downstairs. This is if you take a look around the forge, either after the talk or anytime you're in here, you'll find that this is our typical setup. The laptop sitting between these two guys is the machine that they're actually pairing on. It's got the screen mirrored onto two monitors, and if you notice, each guy has got a keyboard and a mouse of his own. And this is what we like to do, because it's the idea of how we pair is that one person doesn't own it, you both own it. Both people should be able to control it. Interesting dynamics arise out of that, but this is the typical situation that you'll see, either, especially in the forge, and we try to set it up when we're out in the field at client sites as well. These are our team spaces. Pairing station setup. I would estimate that you are going to spend about 95% of your time with your pair partner, unscientific estimate. But I find that to be very true. And I bring this up because one of the things that took a little getting used to and was a little scary at first when I came to Pillar was really getting outside my comfort zone. At the previous job at the open workspace that I described, there were issues, but most of the time, as long as I was getting my work done, I was able to listen to all my favorite music, use the computer how I wished, web browsing and whatever else during the day. As long as my work is done, no one cared. Well, when you're pairing with someone, all of the personal stuff goes out the window. I think that was the biggest challenge, because you're spending almost your entire day like this. You're answerable to your pair partner to be present not just physically, but mentally, which means you are both focused on the problem. So, personal web browsing and things like that kind of go out the window, which I think is for the better. Again, the environment of learning and all the stuff that I've gained on the job, I think is very valuable. It's worth the trade-off. Another thing that we get into, since we're pairing all the time, every team forms a norm around pair switching. Everybody likes to feel it out a little bit differently. Maybe we're switching every day. I've seen that done. It's usually a little less frequent than that. Usually once a week, once a sprint, something like that. What we usually like to do is just, we'll all agree on a day at a time, say after stand up, and we'll all just switch. We'll take a few minutes, talk through it. You're with me, I'm with you, this one's this one, and just all go switch and get into it. I would say that pair programming typically falls into one of two main styles. It's not by any means a new practice. I presume it's as old as programming itself is. The first style is what I like to call kind of the dictator transcriber kind of way of working. Meaning that you've got two people at a pairing station. One person has the hands on the keyboard and the other one's telling them what to type. This is the way some people like to work. I think it's more challenging, which I'll give you an example in a moment here. So in other words, I'm paired with David here. Your hands are on the keyboard, I'm telling you what to type, and you are transcribing for me. I think it's especially challenging, personally. I've got a brief story for you to relay the anecdote of why I think this is not a great way to do pairing, but I'd like to hear about reasons why anyone might disagree. So this is a story about two guys in the late 70s hacking on the Emacs code base.
Yeah.
We got at least one Emacs fan in the house. Yeah. This is we got two. The context is we've got two guys in the late 70s sitting down in a research lab, hacking on the Emacs preprint feature to add some functionality to it. Their names are Guy and Richard. We sat down one morning, recalls Guy. I was at the keyboard and Richard was at my elbow. He was perfectly willing to let me type, but he was also telling me what to type. The programming session lasted for 10 hours. Throughout that entire time, Guy says, neither he nor Richard took a break or made any small talk. By the end of the session, they had managed to hack the preprint feature source code down to just under 100 lines of C. My fingers were on the keyboard the whole time, Guy recalls, but it felt like both of our ideas were flowing onto the screen. He told me what to type, and I typed it. The length of the session revealed itself when Guy finally left the lab. Standing outside the building, he was surprised to find himself surrounded by nighttime darkness. As a programmer, Guy was used to marathon coding sessions, but still something about this session was different. Working with Richard had forced Guy to block out all external stimuli, and this is the key part, and focus his entire mental energies on the task at hand. Looking back, Guy says he found the Richard mind meld both exhilarating and scary at the same time. My first thought afterward was, it was a great experience, very intense, and I never wanted to do it again in my life. Yes?
Is that Guy Steele?
Yes, it is Guy Steele.
Who's Richard? What was Richard's last name?
That would be Richard Stallman. Yeah. So while it seemed to work out well for these guys, you have another question?
No.
Oh, okay. In the office environments that we find ourselves in, we've got interruptions all the time, right? Meetings, lunch breaks, people coming and going. None of us are sitting hacking anything for 10 hours, for example. I believe that this way of doing things is not very, well, at least our environment is not very conducive to this style. There are other issues that I have with it. I typically, when I see one person put hands on the keyboard and the other one just starts dictating, var x equals open bracket, that signals to me that the person speaking doesn't trust the person typing. Anecdotally, in my experience, I find that to be true, so I usually advocate against this style of work. The exception being, if I'm new to what's going on, I don't understand the tech stack or what have you, I might say, okay, talk me through this, tell me what's going on. That's perfectly fine. The second style, and this is typically what we do here at Pillar, is what you would typically call the driver navigator style. Meaning you've got one person who hands on the keyboard driving what's going on, and you've got the second person navigating. Meaning, and this is important, the navigator is paying attention to what's going on, following along, and calling out any mistakes that might be made. Meaning, one person's typing, but you're both actively engaged in what's going on. What it is not is one person typing and the other person waiting for their turn. That's the important thing. And this is exactly why our pairing stations are set up like they are. If we were just sliding the laptop back and forth between each other, that might be a little different. But the idea is, even when you're not typing, you're still working mentally. And socially, as we'll get into. The interpersonal dynamics are where I like to hit on the hardest, because that is very important. Not any two people can just sit down at a computer and go off to the races and have a great time. Spending that much time sitting 2 by 2 at a desk all day with a person, it can be challenging sometimes. It's one of the challenges of how we do our work. People have different comforts with how they like to do things, different comfort zones as far as tools they like to use, what have you. And those are the things you need to hash out between yourself and your partner. Typically, I don't find it to be a huge battle. Just understand that you need to feel that. Before we go any further, I want to get back to the topic of learning styles. Keeping in mind that you're spending a lot of your time paired with one specific person. Both of you are probably going to learn things along the way. It's important to understand that not everyone learns in the same way. We typically have, I believe this is 7 styles we're going to touch on. The first one which you've got is your visual or spatial learner, being someone who prefers using images, pictures, spatial understanding of a problem. I apologize, there's a lot of text here, so I apologize if it gets a little small. Next we have the aural learner. That would be an auditory musical learner, someone who prefers learning using sound and music. Third would be the verbal or linguistic learner, who prefers using words, both in speech and in writing. And I guess the rubber duck debugging definitely falls into that category. We've got the physical or kinesthetic learnings, someone who likes to use their body, their hands, sense of touch. The logical or mathematical one, someone who prefers using logic, reasoning, and systems to understand problems. Intuitively, I think most people would think that this is probably where programmers fall. Outside of academia and research, I'm going to submit that that's probably not the case, especially at Pillar. I'm going to say that most people, at least most people who enjoy their time here, fall in the next category, which is the social type of learning, social interpersonal. I know I definitely fall into this category. I prefer learning socially, with groups, with other people. I like to talk through a problem. I like to say, here's what I understand, help me understand the parts that I don't. Again, back to what I said at the beginning, sitting and listening to someone for a long period doesn't do me a lot of favors. We've also got the solitary or intrapersonal type of learner, the kind of person who can just take a weekend, read a book on Linux kernel development and be hacking out kernel modules on Monday. I envy that kind of person, but that's not me. Before we go any further, do we have any questions, comments? Okay. In addition to the learning styles, what we need to be thinking about is personality traits. I think the first two are going to be pretty intuitive to everyone. Introvertedness. We know what introverts and extroverts are, right? My goodness. Wow. I think my button stuck.
Can you slow down a little bit?
No, that's the speed we're going from now on. This is actually a speed reading exercise. Yeah, surprise. Okay, an introvert, someone who prefers time alone, feels drained by social interactions. And we've got some here, despite the fact that we do code socially. We need to consider the fact that sometimes that person might need to just take a break, recharge the batteries. That kind of person might prefer working alone. That becomes a challenge with pairing. So if anyone is a hardcore introvert, consider that in the context of everything we're discussing tonight. Small social circle, typically. Introspective and curious. And might appear to zone out a lot, which probably means they're introspecting. And this kind of person might prefer writing over speaking as well. More of a feeling type. So contrast that with extrovertedness, someone who enjoys social settings. The Forge is a very social place. If you were to come in here on an average work day at 11 in the morning, you would definitely see that. I'm trying to think of a creative way to characterize this, but if you take a look at how many workstations we've got in the back half of this forge, and put about 20 people in them and have them all talking to each other and doing the things that we're describing, it's a very social environment. By the way, one of the things I do like about that, going back to the headphones anecdote earlier, is that I find that the noise doesn't usually become a problem if you're talking to the person directly next to you, which helps me a lot personally. The extrovert typically does not need a lot of alone time. Thrives around people, typically has a large social circle. Prefers to talk out problems. I know I do, although I believe I share some characteristics of the introvert. I'm primarily extroverted. Outgoing and optimistic. That's me. Not averse to risk. These are all things that we need to be thinking about as we pair with people, and hoping we do. I'm seeing a whole line of my pillar cohorts right over on this side, so I'm eyeballing them pretty hard right now. Empathy is another thing I like to touch on that may not be quite as apparent on the surface. Empathy is directly related to our ability to connect with other people, which is directly connected to our collective success. And we'll get into that more in a moment. In my experience, I believe that the most successful pair programmers exhibit the following 4 virtues. Humility, and by which I mean not being humble, but rather being able to accept that you're never going to stop learning, you're never going to stop making mistakes, meaning you should be able to accept criticism from people around you, as opposed to humble as in meek. Obviously, we don't want to be too prideful, and this is what I'm getting at. Pillar's website, even today, there is a line on there that says, quote unquote, there is no single smartest person in the room, and that is part of our mantra, and I think that's very important, because we are a flat organization. What we try to do is have teams that self-organize, and we have, it's not like we all look to one person and say, okay, tell everyone what to do. We defer to you on all decisions. We typically try to do it as a group. We all work it out, we arrive at a conclusion together, and we figure these things out for better, usually not for worse. Empathy. This is your ability to connect with someone who you may be pairing with. A formal definition of empathy would be the capacity to understand or feel what another person is experiencing from their frame of reference. I want to pause on that because I think this is one of the biggest challenges that comes up in pair programming. You need to be able to pick up on the other person's social cues. You need to understand where they may be coming from. One of the mistakes I see people making in the workplace is being annoyed by the other person not understanding, not wanting to accept that they may know something that I don't, or just generally not respecting their perspective, or they might be coming at it from a different place than I am. A quick check as you're pairing with someone. Ask yourself, am I trampling on this person? Am I challenging them to participate? We're going to see a little bit of this later. A mindset of teaching and learning. Thinking about everything we've talked about so far. This is something I like to bring up because if, for example, we've got 2 people pairing, one person knows how to do something, the other one doesn't, it doesn't mean that the first person does everything. This means the first person teaches the second one what they're doing. And this is how we create this environment of learning that I think is very unique and important at Pillar. So we'll make use of those teachable, learnable moments. Presentation is also very important. But I think when someone messes up, there's a difference between saying, no, you messed up, and maybe let me teach you a better way to do that. It's all about uplift. We get into this with our clients a lot, actually. Depending on the type of engagement we've got with a client, there may be a lot of uplift involved. They may be part of why we're there, maybe because they say, not only do we need help delivering the software, but we barely understand how to do it. This is something that happens. And those projects are very, they're interesting because we need to go in there and be problem solvers and teachers to our clients. Now, pivoting away from challenges, one of my favorite things about pairing was all the little things that I've learned that I never expected. So anyone who's ever worked with me knows that I'm a big command line guy. I love working on Unix or Linux. And I can't tell you how many bash aliases or git aliases and things like that I picked up from somebody just because they were using it. Like, wait a second, what was that thing you just did? What was that little shortcut? That's a completely unintentional side effect of pairing, but I can't tell you how many tricks I picked up. And then later on somebody says, hey, where did you get that? I said, well, I was pairing with so-and-so a couple of years ago and just learned it on the spot. I think that's kind of a great thing, because I'm really big on, I got into software development, into the field, because I care a lot about writing good software. I want to understand it better tomorrow than I did today. And I just basically want to be very good at what I do. And I wouldn't be able to be where I am without learning from smart people. So I think it's no surprise that the fourth virtue would be supportiveness. And skipping ahead, we are all interested in the success of our project, our team, and our partner. So we need to think about that. If we're not helping our partner succeed, how can we expect the rest of our team at large in our project to succeed? And again, we remove the fear of failure and build trust. So, without being too tutorial, I'll go through a couple of things that I think are pretty important, if I can distill it down to a few points here. Do's and don'ts as far as pairing. Do look out for your partner. Do offer opportunities to learn from mistakes. Have the humility to learn from that person. Be present. This is one that I think sometimes gets taken for granted. Can anyone tell me what it means when we talk about a context switch? Can anyone give me an example? That's exactly right. What was said was multitasking, switching from one thing to another and needing to change your mindset. That's right. The context being all the things that are in your brain at one time. That's important. And it is challenging, right? You know, we're in the middle of something and somebody walks up and asks us an unrelated question. It kind of takes a minute to pivot, right? I bring this up because what people can tend to do, which I don't like to see, is not be present while you're the navigator in the situation. I never want to see somebody pull out their phone, because now your context is Twitter or whatever you may be looking at. You know, I turn to you and ask you a question and you have to reload your context, right? It's draining, actually. It's very cognitively draining. Also, this is a difficult one. Do let, or if you have to, make the other person be the driver. Don't let them be passive. Their imposter syndrome be damned. Even if they feel like they can't do it, make them. And let or make them engage their brain. Again, don't let the person be passive. And this is very important. Talk as you work. When you're driving, what we do is we talk through the problem together. What we don't do, what is not helpful, is we have one person, oh, I got the keyboard, I'm just gonna go along my merry way and hack it away for an hour while the other person watches and doesn't understand what I'm thinking. It's a social activity. So do not, I've already said this, but don't throw the other person under the bus for mistakes. We at Pillar do not talk over people when we can help it, although sometimes you gotta interject. It's a little different. We do not work silently. We don't check out when the other person is driving. And we also, if we can help it, don't take complete control of where a solution goes. Again, the other person needs to has a stake in it, whether they like it or not. They're a member of the team. Where that solution goes and whether it works well, you both have a stake in it, so you better both be thinking about it. And also, this is my preference, we don't dictate unless requested. Think about it, things are on the keyboard, it's just a little helper for that. To put it in perspective, the metaphor I like to use in this situation, having kind of been on the receiving end of putting my hands on the keyboard and immediately being told what to type, years ago I had a job working in a retail store, And every morning, one of the opening activities was checking stock. We had to go back into the back room with a checklist. We're supposed to have this many of this item, this many of this item, and it was just shelves and shelves of boxes. Well, imagine that you or me in that stock room. You have a checklist in front of you. You look at the shelf and you see that there are 5 rows of 5 boxes, so you start multiplying in your head. In the middle of that, I walk up, or someone else walks up and starts saying 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and you kind of turn around. Now you've forgotten what numbers you are multiplying and you're not sure what they just said. But in this situation, the other person kind of gives a puzzled look and says, well, don't you know how to count? That's what we want to avoid happening. We want you to be able to think through your solutions, and we want your partner to be able to think through their solutions. What I'd like to do next is bring up a few volunteers to embody some of our pairing practices. I've got 4. No, this is not a big volunteer pool. I have. We've got some of our apprentices from Pillar who have volunteered their time to come up here and do some live pairing with us tonight. So first up, we've got Jake and Max. So what Jake and Max are going to be doing is they're going to be TDDing a common problem called fizz buzz. Who in here has not heard of fizz buzz? Okay, fizz buzz is something that may very well come up in job interviews, for example. It's a simple problem, and it basically shows, do you know how to break a problem down? The rules of fizz buzz are you write a program that takes in an integer, and it gives output depending on what that integer is. If the integer is divisible by 3, it will output fizz. If the integer is divisible by 5, it will output buzz. And if it's divisible by 3 and 5, it will output fizz buzz. Otherwise, it just returns the integer. I'll give you guys a little audio here.
Oh, wait. Yeah, I'll just.
Want to break it?
Yeah, no, not yet. So, okay, I've got our test over here on the right and over on the left. Alright, so we got our production code, and I expect this is failing. What do you think? Alright, so yeah, looks like it's failing. I don't know how to. No. Okay, so anyway, we're just going to make it pass, so do 1. Alright, so pass. Okay, so now. Should we do 2?
Yeah, all right, whatever.
I need to do this. So. This works out.
Why did you turn off my mouse?
Alright, so.
Alright,
Might as well.
yeah. Really?
I got this, don't worry about it. Just
This is pairing, not mobbing. We're gonna talk about mobbing another time. That's some people. I would only run one of the tests. What are you doing here?
What's our?
Wait, what's this? How's this working out?
You want me to show you?
Yeah. No. I got it. Figured it out. Look. make this IDE? Why are we doing an IDE?
You just don't know what you're doing.
So first of all, let's not just
No, we
throw
don't do that.
numbers into the thing. Yeah. Wait, stop. Great, now one of them's failing. What'd you do?
Okay, we'll pause there, guys.
Okay, so I would like to hear from the audience. What did everyone see in that pair interaction? Anyone call it out?
Cell phone.
The cell phone, yes. Someone was not present in that interaction.
Who?
If you were watching, maybe you'd know. What else?
Fighting over method names.
Yes, fighting over what was being written. That's important. We saw both of them trying to grab the keyboard and mouse and type at the same time. You need it, yeah, not exercising patience over who's driving. Yes? Blame, yes. Also, the what did you do? Why isn't this working? I think if Max had been paying attention from the beginning, he would have understood what Jake was trying to accomplish and not thrown him under the bus for it. Anything else? Not listening to and answering your partner's questions. Yeah, shame on you, Max. Okay. Thank you, Jake and Max. Let's give them a round of applause. Now coming up to join Max, we've got John. Woo! I know there's not a ton of audio for the interaction in the back. Yeah, John. I'll put this as close as I can. Guys, let's make sure they can hear you from the rafters, from the balcony.
Oh no. What's happened? All right, so anyway, what we're going to do is talk about pair programming today.
Oh.
Yeah, no, I got it. We're all good. All right, so we've got the first two tests where they're passing. They're both green, so I figure we're going to go ahead and do another test method. I figure we might as well get into the fun part now. We're going to, yeah. Return Fizz. Nice. What do you think? Is that
I
good test to do
don't think
next?
there's anything to get excited about. Just keep going.
All right. Oh wait, no, we want to return Fizz. Yeah. Yeah, cool. And we got a passing test. Okay, I can't not remember how to get this stupid IDE to give me all of the, what? Do you remember how to get the, get it to run all the tests? You can say,
You run one test.
yeah, I know. That's
just-
how do I get it to run all the tests? What?
Up here.
Yeah.
Just run the whole class. There you go.
Nice. All right, it's ready. Go for it.
Keep going. Now you're gonna write.
When I wrote the test, you know where I wrote to make it pass?
Yeah. You obviously need practice. Let's go.
Okay. So I'm thinking an if statement looks good here. We're gonna go ahead and do input. Wait, no, that's an integer. So what?
Just keep going. We got deliverables we gotta do. We gotta get this going.
Okay. So you said that I should run that up here?
There you go. Good job. You remembered that.
Yes. Cool. Nice.
That was less painful than I thought. Okay. Keep going. Let's do the next test.
You don't want to write any of them?
No. I'm not the one who needs practice.
What do you think we should do next? Should we do 5?
That is what comes next, right?
I mean, you could do that, or because it's multiples of 3, we could expand asking. I'm asking, should we go ahead and do 5 now, or
Why are you so confused about this?
okay? I'll tell you what. I'm going to go ahead and do 5. Whew. You happy with that? Does that look good?
So far, so good.
Yes. Yes. Right there.
I really don't know what anyone. No, let's keep moving.
Okay.
Due to the project, we gotta make sure you get your time.
Your hands first, or
Don't worry about me.
okay. Yeah. I think that's gonna do it. I think that's gonna do it. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I forgot about the hurdy hands. So.
Just fist bumps. Now we're getting worked up.
Okay. All right. So, what do you want to test next?
We had it earlier, multiples. So,
Oh, all right.
take multiples and trigger 5.
Okay. Cool. Cool.
You don't need my permission to solve the problem we've already laid out.
Okay. Yeah. I kind of feel like we should start considering like refactoring.
Oh, you're not proud of the code we wrote? Is it the problem? You're not doing this right the first time?
I mean, you know, TDD, red, green, refactor. I mean, it's not going to be perfect in that for the first time. Okay. So you think my code's perfect?
That's what you're saying. It's gonna get
Nice.
the job done.
Yeah, cool. Printed.
Okay, we'll pause there, guys. On John Reddit.
Okay, scenario number 2.
Stopped us on red.
Yep. It's gonna make you wait to get green. Okay, so once again, what did people see in that interaction? Yeah, I wouldn't want to work with him either.
What?
I don't know. Take my pick, I guess.
Didn't come in with the teaching and learning mindset.
That's right. Yeah, great. No teaching and learning mindset. Anyone else want to characterize that? Yes.
Because of that, Max was recommending any mistakes or asking actual questions.
Yeah, because of the sniping, Max was afraid to ask questions or make mistakes. It is not supportive. Correct. Yeah, you got someone, instead of working with you, sort of just standing over your shoulder and pointing out what mistakes you may be making, and not in a helpful way. That's not good. You guys are both way too good at that. But anyway. Anything else? Yes. Bad communication in general. Yeah, I would say there's very little good.
He also took away learning opportunities from Max because instead of letting him learn or walking him through it, he just took over and with
Yeah, I think that's a great call out. Rather than letting Max learn and kind of talk through this thing, it was just sort of, no, do that next. No. Don't flesh out your idea, right? I see another hand over on this side. Okay.
I'm not getting excited about this, but I'm really made it sound like we're wasting our time with this. So what was his incentive? Because he's got something better to do. That's all I thought.
Yeah. Yeah, basically, John made it clear he had something else to be doing. Yeah, like internet browsing, fantasy football, right? Yeah. One thing that I noticed that I'm hoping everyone else did too, John stood there the whole time and did not touch the keyboard and mouse once. Stood there with his hands in his pockets, aloof, but ready to just sort of shed negativity all over the place. Oh.
He was letting the other person try. That's unrealistic things to do.
He was letting him try, but he was not doing a good job of navigating, I would
That's my
say.
story, I'm sticking to it.
Right. Okay, we've got one more role play here. I'd like to bring Zuzana up. Welcome, Zuzana.
Going good, Susanna. How you doing?
I'm all right. What are you doing?
We just, you had it right in time. We just switched out on a family test. We just got through all of the unusual cases. It returns a number. It will return 3 when we've got, I'm sorry. We'll return a fizz when we pass in 3. It's returning a buzz when we got, you know how it works. The multiples is what we're into attack.
So, letter context, we're working on FizzBuzz. And are there any cases, like any additional things? Or are we just doing standard, like the FizzBuzz and no like extra?
Nothing extra today. I'm sorry. I thought we forgot you wanted to stand up. We missed it. But yeah, we're doing FizzBuzz. We get finished. There's nothing special, just the multiples of 3 and 5.
All right, so let's get to it. We're failing successfully.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Step 1.
All right.
Turn it red.
So, what are we working on now? Passing, do you want me to try to implement this?
Absolutely. Yeah, I got the test ready to go. So if you want to take a crack at it.
Alright. So I would go ahead, like my idea, because it's multiplication here, so my idea is to go with division on the other side. So if I would go ahead and do something like input, module 3,
That would work. Yeah, absolutely.
you think, let me do it and I'll see if that does. So I would go ahead here and I would do if input is divisible, so divisible by 3, and that would be 0 here. Right? Something like that.
Let's give it a shot.
I don't see why not. Alright!
Hey, nice work.
Good job.
That's what I'm talking about.
Awesome. So we have the 6s now. So let's do what, 10? 12 5s? I think that's a good idea. I'm just gonna copy this.
That seems smart.
Alright, so it returns even 10. It returns.
Forgot the yes.
Oh, thank you.
No, not Max. That guy was Harrison Park.
And that's right. You're returning buzz. Yes. Alright, so here we're gonna do buzz for this one. And then here. Is that right?
I think so.
Alrighty, I'm gonna run it and we're failing 1.
Cool.
Take it away.
Okay. I'm all the good copy. So I think that we just modulus 5.
Yeah, that's my idea too.
That should work, right? Good.
I believe so.
Fine, huh?
I mean, you know, it's physical.
Perfect. All right. So what about 15?
I like that.
And you don't think?
I'm thinking, well, 11 doesn't make really sense. Are we testing that it returns? We already have like 1 and 2, right?
Yep, those are up the top.
So yeah, because those are going to be the actual numbers. So everything else should be the same.
So you think there's any value in doing maybe 5 or 12, something like that, or do you think this is good enough?
I would go for, well, 12 would be just 3s. I would say 15 because then we can do like 3s and 5s, so that's going to introduce new case for us.
Okay.
Because we only have right now fizz or buzz, we don't have fizz buzz yet.
Works for me. I'm actually going to start from the top here. I know you start at the bottom and work up. I like working top down, right? Just to make sure I cover all the.
Do you want to change that 15 into like actual word?
This 15?
Yeah.
That is consistent. Thank you. And then bugs. Alright, that should fail.
It definitely should. And it is.
Alright.
So, yeah, so I'm thinking here that basically going with another if up here. So like if I would go ahead and do, if we have basically this case, right?
works.
Yeah. And I'll go ahead and return, what we're returning,
Sure, we want to put it at the top.
well, I believe so, because then it's gonna check first for that. If not, it's going to be already like 15 is going to be divisible by 3, and it's going to just return falsely fixed, and it's never going to get to 5.
I like that, good point.
Unless we would do some, if it's divisible by 3, and then append boss to it. But that's a little bit fancier.
Wait, hold on. You didn't put the brackets, is that gonna work?
Oh yeah, I forgot about this.
Tyler's not complaining, that might be a new trick.
Well, it's a one-liner, so
That's crazy.
it's one-liner turn. I'm coming from moved over from Java to Python, and now no bracket will for me.
Yeah, okay, that's that. Okay.
But I mean, I feel like to be consistent, we should do it. I like the consistency, so let's just do that. Just for sake of having it pretty.
You know, that Max guy, who pull request without any brackets. Hey.
And the linter would be
We
fine.
did it.
Okay, thanks, guys.
Okay, once again, what did everyone see there?
She didn't leave him hanging.
She didn't even, yeah, those are some crisp high fives, nicely done. You, sir, were you gonna say something?
No, I was just giving a thumbs up.
Oh, you look good, yeah.
It's positive affirmation when somebody strives to see every step of progress. It's a good thought here.
Yeah, affirmation when things go well. Obviously, there's a little bit of showmanship there with the high fiving. We don't always turn to each other and do that, but we do sometimes. But that is actually a good thing to call out. Calling out your partner's successes, that's great. Yes?
The interactions seem really good, but they continue the practice of avoiding third-party criteria refactor, particularly in the tests.
They were light on the refactor step of writer and refactor. That's very true.
Fair practice.
Well, retro on this.
Fair enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
Two techniques you want to use, he asked the question, going to use as the professional one.
Yeah. That was one of the things that I really like to see too, where she had a technique she wanted to use, right? And he said, where are you going with this? And she explained it. Right? That's part of helping each other learn and helping each other understand each other's thinking. That helps you succeed together. I think it's great. Other comments? Yes. Yes, that was the real John, for the record. Yes, that was.
On a good day.
Well, I'll let you everyone suspense as to what Max, the real Max is. Yes.
They seem to actually enjoy what they were doing.
Yes.
Having fun.
They did seem to enjoy what they were doing and having fun. I'll let you two answer. How typical do you feel that is?
It's pretty typical. Even a hard problem, if I'm clicking with my partner and we're going about it with the right mindset, it makes what would be a terrible rush or a real bad slog into something that's, not so bad.
Yeah, that resonates with me too. When it goes well, it can be a lot of fun. Yeah, there are difficult times like with anything, but it is fun to succeed with your partner for sure.
I just wanted to say something about high-fiving, because I actually have David here that we were pairing today. How many times do we high-five?
I would think that
A whole bunch.
Yeah, that's true. I have noticed some high-fiving coming from the team space lately. That's a totally good call out. Well, thanks to our volunteers. It's here for John, Jake, Max, and John. That's everything we've got for you. I'd like to open the floor to any questions, comments, anecdotes. Yes?
Seminary experimentation with comparing partnerships, high differential experience and
Yeah, with respect to pairing partners who don't match up well in terms of experience, we do that intentionally and unintentionally, depending on the team, the personnel we've got, the challenges at hand. I generally like to see it because I think there's benefit in it for both parties. Being able to learn to teach someone else is just important, isn't as important as them learning. As people get sort of later in their careers into the senior level, it becomes important to them to be able to become mentors for people earlier in their careers. And we have and have had some great mentors here at Pillar, so I think that's been great. Yeah.
In that situation, is it better to let them make a mistake first and then correct them, or correct them as they're making the mistake?
Okay, the question was, in a situation where we've got someone more experienced and someone less experienced, is it better to let the person make the mistake or correct them before they have a chance to finish making the mistake? I would say, generally speaking, and this is my experience, I think it's better to do, unless it's something severe that's going to consume a lot of time, I say just let them make the mistake. I'll give you an example, and I will cop to being on the receiving end of this, which is why I land on the side that I do. A few years ago, do we have any Python developers in the room, by the way? So, sat down with someone who was much better at Python than I was, and probably still am. Sat down to iterate over some sort of a collection, I don't recall exactly. As soon as I started to write 4, and by the way, this is after my partner had been more or less soloing for half a day, and I finally got a chance to type something. I got halfway through the statement, and I said, no, don't do it like that. Steals the keyboard back, and well, that's the day I learned what a list comprehension is. But I think there could have been better ways I could have learned, that he could have taught me that. I think it would have been better to just say, that for loop is fine, let's refactor that and I'll show you a more compact syntax. That's my opinion on that. Yes, we'll go right to left here.
You mentioned earlier about introversion and extroversion when it comes to pair programming. Do you see introverts thriving despite in pair programming, despite their isolationism, or even perhaps because of it, because it kind of forces them to think a different way, kind of bounce ideas off someone else when they would normally never have that opportunity?
Yeah,
does it play a role?
On the topic of introverts, the question was, have I seen introverts thrive either because of or in spite of their introvertedness? I would definitely say that they've been rare. I can think of a couple that I've paired with. You pointing at yourself back there?
Seriously, yeah.
Max?
Yeah. A +1 there.
I'm going to say I don't believe you, but we're going to have to talk about that. You're so good on stage. I have trouble believing
When I
that.
talk about the shy actor thing, that's me. Like
Well, would you like to answer this question? Because you can speak to it personally.
What's that? Oh yeah.
Yeah. Come up on stage, Mr. Introvert.
Okay, so yes, I'm an introvert. Typically I go home exhausted every single day because it does draw the energy out of me. But for me at least, I'm like a stage actor type of introvert. So like if you take me to a party, I'm gonna sit in the corner and maybe pet the person's dog or whatever, and I'm just gonna hide out and I'm never gonna talk to anybody. If I know 5 people at the party, I'll talk to those 5 people, and if they introduce me to 5 more, I'll be okay, but I'd still rather go home and just play video games or something. But yes, an introvert can definitely thrive in this kind of environment. If you're the kind of person who, like me, once you've got permission to be interacting with somebody else, then in a pair programming environment, that's where you're going to be. So yeah, introverts I think can thrive and learn a whole lot of stuff from this. You just can't be so far into the introvert thing that you just can't make it through a day. Does that make sense? Anybody?
I can come back. Actually, I can talk to you about that.
Oh, great,
too.
got another introvert.
See?
So a third comment on that, as to talent engagement in recruiters, we vet that out. We talk to you. We are really transparent about the collaboration, the communication it takes to be a pair programmer. So when we are vetting candidates and we're in the interview process, that's the first conversation we're talking about is, we do pair programming. You know, if you're a heads down coder, want to sit in the corner, throw your hoodie up and code your heart out, that's cool. But this is not the place for you because we don't do that. So it's a conscious decision on your part to say, am I the hoodie guy or am I the collaborator? And something you have to figure out because some people are introverts, but they don't want to be. So this is kind of a great stepping stone to kind of start, you know, yielding yourself away from that and trying to get into a situation where collaboration and communication is comfortable because you are at least focusing on the same problem, working something together. It's not like you have to come up with dialogue, you have to come up with things. You're kind of got the thing there and now you're just talking back and forth. So it's a really great first step to kind of, you know, get away from being an introvert or teaching yourself more extroverted characteristics is what I say. Because I don't know that you ever get away from that. I think people who are introverted kind of can stay in that set, at least pieces and parts in their life, but these are steps to help you kind of like barrier through that. So
I have one more thing to
Can I
add.
say-
Yep.
I'd like to add one more thing back to it. So.
Yes,
Man, you guys opened a can of
I'm not an
worms.
introvert, so this is not, I would not, we don't think a talent engagement consultant is an introvert. One thing though, just to add, and Julie, I know talks about this all the time alongside me, we give you the opportunity within our interview cadence to actually like work a day in the life for 2 hours here with the software artisan. So we have pairs that have been here between 3 and 16 years, anywhere from a software artisan to a principal software artisan. So as you go through the interview cadence, if this is a place that you want to work, an organization you want to be part of, you get that experience and you can kind of gauge it for yourself. Can I sit in the forge? Can I be here for 2 hours in pair? Is this something that, you know, I can see myself in a day-to-day, you know, environment? And so that is just something that I wanted to mention, that if this is a place that you could see yourself at, you have the opportunity to sort of test it out and see what that's like.
Okay, so I wanted to say one other thing about this. On the whole introvert thing, I worked for about 3 years in development in other places where you could be the introvert, head down, headphones on kind of thing. When you hit a wall in that environment and you're a total introvert, you feel like a jerk trying to talk to any senior person because the imposter syndrome just kicks in and then you're just like, oh God, if I ask him this and it's an easy answer, then I'm going to look like the dumbest person. I'm going to get fired and everything like that. So yeah, if you can manage it, if it's the kind of thing where you're an introvert by nature typically or by choice, but you can be the kind of person that can spend a lot of time with like one friend or whatever, one person, then this, I can't recommend this enough. The whole kind of feeling like you've got permission to ask the stupid questions all the time will make you grow by leaps and bounds. So, anyway.
That was great. That was better answer than I definitely could have given. Did you have another note on the introverted topic, or is this another question? Okay, we'll get to you next. So the question you.
It's more of a comment, really, but just when you were talking about letting someone make a mistake versus correcting. Like I just had a pair programming experience last week in my project, and the guy that I was working with set up pretty higher level, and so I was creating a method that was like setting Boolean, but it was I did both ones. I did set it true. I didn't use the word set. I said is available and is not available. And he just let me do it, and he didn't object, which I think was really forbearing of him, because then the next day, it was Saturday, and it was my mental health day, and I was like, oh, that's just a set. Okay, I'll just do a set available. And it was just nice that he like let me get to that learning by myself, and it just made me feel so good, and I just wanted to point that out as a really nice thing.
That's a great anecdote. I've had experiences like that too, where the person gives you a chance to let it breathe. They don't freak out if it's not written perfectly the first time. Unless we think that way out of hand, I mean, I always say refactoring is free. Just costs a little bit of time, right? Yes.
Yeah. So it clearly seems like, pair programming, lots of benefits, great. Can you justify the benefits versus, basically paying someone twice as much to do the same job?
Yeah, that's a great question. That's something our clients ask us is, am I just paying 2 people to do one person's job? And yes, obviously, in terms of man hours, yes, it is 2 people doing something, but in the outcomes that you get from that, like higher quality of your deliverables, and better team cohesion, collaboration, better immersion design, we believe that this pays for itself in dividends that you get in the long term. Okay. Yeah, I think we had a question from Soil. Question was comparing to be used outside of development. I would say absolutely. Yeah, it's a collaborative practice. I mean, I can't think of a time when I've seen it, but gosh, I've only worked in this industry basically. So yeah, definitely. I would think that the kind of things we're talking about, it's just like Agile. Agile is not a software development practice, it's a business practice. It applies to other industries use it. So yeah. Can you use it? Okay, we're going to have one final question here from the gentleman in the blue.
I'm just wondering if you've ever run into a situation when pairing where the Socratic approach of letting someone fail actually burns you or it comes back on you in a negative way. Because some people like to be told, that they've made a mistake quickly so that they can correct it. They don't want to. It feels almost like it's too much friction.
Yeah.
Have you ever run into that situation before?
Yeah, the question was, have I run into a situation where it burns me by not letting the person make a mistake? One doesn't come to mind, but I'm sure they exist. Typically, I mean, when I say let the person make a mistake, I'm talking about small things as they write. Obviously, don't let the person go like burn down your prod server or something. That's going to be bad. Little things as you write, like as we saw our people up here TDDing, one person writes a test and it isn't perfect. Maybe before they're getting ready to run it, that's when we'll speak up and say, hey, maybe I think you forgot to mock something or something along those lines. Does that sort of answer your question?
Yeah, more or less.
Okay. Okay, folks, I think we're out of time here. I'm going to hand back off to Julie to wrap this up here.
All right. So let's give a round of applause again to Rick Upper for the great and also a big thanks to Susanna over there, Max, John, and Jake. So thank you guys. Susanna, John, Jake, and Max have all been part of our apprenticeship program and just recently graduated. So really great to when we get apprentices to come in and then they're now in the fold with the rest of the artisans. So great having that.